We're at Camp Cove. We're within Sts'ailes territory. You can see in the background Echo Island. Way down at the south end of the lake is Harrison Hot Springs, the village of Harrison Hot Springs. Over here is Cascade Peninsula. And then behind the peninsula is the Coast Mountains. And that separates Harrison Lake from the Upper Fraser Valley. We're at Camp Cove here today because Sts'ailes and the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure have been negotiating off and on for over 10 years a highway trespass going through a reserve. It's become essential to transfer a certain amount of land in exchange for that trespass land. The Sts'ailes is interested in moving back up to Harrison Lake is to really have a presence within their traditional territory again. They had over 30 village sites strewn around Harrison Lake, up to the Lower Lillooet River, Sts'ailes Lake, Harrison River. But since the creation of reserves, they've been entirely on the Harrison River. So this is a great opportunity for them to be back on the land here. The land we're looking at Camp Cove is roughly 30 hectares in size. Through negotiation, Sts'ailes determined it was essential for them to know what they're getting into with regard to archaeological sites that could potentially inhibit development. It's an expensive process to undertake, and also potentially contaminated sites. This was a former log sort yard. There's been a lot of parties here over the years. We're doing the archaeological assessment in concert with Phase 1 and Phase 2 environmental studies. Well, I visited Camp Cove over the years many times. We're doing a systematic traverse all the way across the entire 30 hectares at both 10 Mile Bay and Camp Cove. During that traverse, we're identifying areas of high archaeological potential for subsurface remains. So we're flagging and GPSing level areas, large boulders that could potentially be rock shelters, benches beside creeks close to water. And then we're going back and shovel testing those fairly systematically so that we can start to determine the extent of archaeological deposits throughout the two parcels of land. This orientation here lets people see just across the lake. Blaine, have you been finding many artifacts?
Today we've found quite a bit, but it's not too bad.
Sts'ailes is particularly interested in us undertaking this project for a detailed inventory of all archaeological sites within these two properties. First and foremost, there are dots on the map that can demonstrate that their ancestors have been utilizing this land. And then from there, they want to build to understand the ways in which the ancestors were using the land. So were they here because the lake got too stormy and they had to pull the canoe over and make a fire? Or were they here specifically harvesting resources that they could only access here or could best access here? It's even possible that they had a village here or a temporary camp. We're specifically targeting the landforms that we know have the highest potential for subsurface remains. So we're looking at small little coves off the main bay here. It's very sheltered from the elements. There's level benches, there's soil development, and we're optimistic that we'll be able to find occupation surfaces, cultural depressions where people might have processed some of the foods that they've been harvesting here, butchering areas, camping from overnight. We think it's going to take about 2.5 to 3 weeks to assess both properties. Now this is contingent on the number of archaeological sites we find and how large they are. Already at Camp Cove here, we've identified one fairly large and significant archaeological site. We're pulling out hundreds of artifacts. We think that there's actually some antiquity to the site as well. So we're trying to take things a little more slowly. We're looking for areas where we can put in evaluative units. And most particularly, we're trying to find cultural features with charcoal and stratigraphic layers so we can start getting some time depth and figuring out what people were up to here. So we've slowed down in one sense in that we found a very large, significant site with some antiquity. But on the other hand, after assessing the rest of the property, we've determined there isn't actually that high potential in a lot of the other areas. So some of the shovel testing in more remote areas back up and behind in the bluffs and on level benches, it went quite a bit faster than anticipated. Really, we've been able to target the one area that we like the most, that we think is going to be able to tell us the most about how the Sts'ailes ancestors used this land. And by doing that, we're able to focus our resources, both in terms of time here and money to do analysis later. It'll allow us to get more samples, to analyze all of those samples, and to be able to tell an interesting story about this particular area over time. So this is the most interesting shovel test we've excavated today. We actually have 3 distinct layers, stratigraphic layers. No clear charcoal banding or occupation surfaces. Nothing really clear to be able to look at the different assemblages either.
Sure.
Based on the color differences, yeah, we've got all of these artifacts from the top layer, and we've got these ones from the next layer down, and then just got the last couple artifacts from the very bottom, and that's actually from this layer with the microblades. So we took a piece of charcoal. It was a good chunk. I think we're going to be pretty much on schedule for timing and budget. But this is why you always put in assumptions into your contracts. There needs to be assumption that you're only going to find a certain number of sites and that those sites are going to consist of low-density lithic scatters. The moment you start to find subsurface deposits and horrors that you can sample for faunal and botanical analysis, radiocarbon dating, you can typically go back to the client and say that you found more. Especially the case when you're working directly with First Nations, because there's that extra value in having this kind of knowledge. It's not just an inventory, it's not just the presence of artifacts, it's also what those artifacts and what the rest of that cultural material can tell you. So we're fortunate in this situation to be working for the nation and to have their input throughout this stage.